A blended malt Scotch whiskey made by the Springbank distillery? Yeah, you've got my attention. Let's talk about Campbeltown Loch. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey on the West Coast. My name is Matt, and today we're going to be trying the Campbeltown Loch blended malt Scotch whiskey. Now, I'm really excited about this because I've wanted to try this for quite a long time, and I thankfully was able to get a sample from Hexagonal Crank, someone who watches the channel, is a big contributor to the Canadian whiskey Reddit subreddit. So thank you so much for that, and I really appreciate it, and I hope I do it justice with this review. Now, what is Campbeltown Loch blended malt whiskey? Well, it is a blended malt Scotch whiskey that is put together by the Springbank Distillery in Campbeltown. Now, it is vatted and bottled on site at Springbank. So when you look at the bottle, it's going to look a lot like a Springbank bottle. It's going to be embossed with Springbank, and it's going to look like the same type of label. Right away, it's instantly recognizable as somewhat affiliated with Springbank. Well, that's because they're the ones making and blending this up. Now, it's 100% comprised of Campbeltown malt whiskeys. So Springbank, Glen, and Glen Scotia distilleries would be involved. But not only that, the website for Springbank also mentions that they use all 5 malts of the region that the distilleries make. So what does that mean? Well, that means that they include not specifically these ages, but Springbank is one of the distillate types in Campbeltown Loch, as well as the unpeated Springbank distillate, Hazelburn. Okay, so that's 2. Furthermore, heavily peated Springbank, Longrow, a representative from the Glen distillery, operated by Springbank 3 months of the year, I believe, Kilkerran. And finally, the representative from the 3rd distillery, the 5th type of distillate, Glen Scotia. So, that is quite an intriguing and compelling blended malt Scotch whiskey. I'm really excited to try something that is comprised of all these types of distillate, and I'm really intrigued to see how it all comes together. Now, there was an older version of Campbeltown Loch, which was just a blended Scotch, which meant it was a blend of both malt and grain. And actually, it was about 40% malt and 60% grain, and it was only comprised of both Springbank and Longrow distillate from Campbeltown. So if you see the old, it's kind of like a pale, like off-white label or kind of creamish color. That's an older version of it. So there's the modern blended malt, and then there's the older just blend. So that's interesting and good to know. Outside of that, I should mention, I'm not certain as to the batch of this bottling of Campbeltown Loch, but I would assume or guess it would be a 2022 batch, as that's when we started to see them show up in Canada. They sold very quickly and they're hard to get. So I haven't got my hands on a bottle yet, but yeah, I would guess it's a 2022 batch. The other thing I want to do before we jump into the review here is I wanted to ask you a question. Maybe you can think about it while you're listening to this review. If you could create your own version of Campbeltown Loch blended malt using all 5 of these types of distillates, but removing one of them and replacing it with a special edition version of that type, what would you choose? What would it be? So to try and explain that a bit, if it's a bit confusing, say you had to use young versions of Kilkerran and Longrow, Hazelburn, Glen Scotia, and Springbank. You could replace one of these with a special edition version of its legs. So maybe I would think possibly using the Springbank 1996 Amontillado cask, or maybe a local barley release, or maybe you really like the Longrow Red and would think that that would go really well in a blended malt with the other distillates. Honestly, there's so many options and possibilities. I think it could be a really fun question to get an answer to. So let me know, what would you change to put your own little spin on a Campbeltown malt blended malt? Campbeltown Loch, blended malt. Let's get to the review. Okay, Campbeltown Loch blended malt Scotch whiskey. It's 46% non-chill filtered, natural color. All the lovely things that we would come and know to expect from Springbank. So on the nose, really instantly, the first thing I thought of was really it's just a very Longrow-ish nose, in that I'm getting kind of like a overripe like melon, like an overripe like smoked melon. You can definitely get the peat on here, but it's not overwhelming. Yeah, kind of like a dirty, funky sort of peat. Actually, funkier than I assumed it would. I thought that some of that would have been blended out. Yeah, a good amount of tropical fruit, but there's definitely like a little touch of, if you're familiar with like the type of sherry cask you usually get from Springbank, there's like a certain type of funk to it that is bordering on a bit of sulfur. I'm a little bit sulfur blind. I don't always pick it out, and I don't really find it all that, I don't dislike it the way others do. And so I don't mind what I'm smelling here for sure. Yeah, I think there's a real Longrow, and even possibly a bit of a Kilkerran heavily peated touch on here. Again, that overripe melon, cantaloupe, funk, and almost like a bit lactic. There's a lactic note too. I kind of find those when I'm drinking Longrow and Kilkerran heavily peated. So those distillates are coming through for me. But overall, the feel of the peat level is probably somewhere between like 10 ppm, honestly. I don't think it's quite at like 15. Maybe it's there, but 10 to 15, let's say, is where on the nose I'd put the phenols. Yeah, some overripe tropical fruit. Somewhat lactic. I wouldn't go cheesy. It's not like a Legic cheese or anything like that, but like a rubbery, dirty type of peat. Yeah. Touch coastal, and again, some of that like light emphasis on the light Springbank sulfur. But this nose is really compelling. Shockingly good nose to start out, and really readily apparent that Longrow and Kilkerran DNA. Awesome. Let's try this on the palate. Okay, heavier on the peat on the palate than I expected. So let's say that 15 phenols instead of the 10, a bit higher. Buttery, creamy mouthfeel. Mineralic. So some I'd say a bit salty, a little bit of salinity there. And on the finish right now is where I'm at on this sip. I'm getting some of those industrial notes, those machine shop sort of notes that I associate with Springbank distillate. There's a lot of sweetness in here too, like vanilla, honey, kind of like, dessert tones that I would associate almost with Glen, Scotia. Almost like a little touch of butterscotch or like Werther's Originals sort of candies. Yeah, pear, malt, honey. Again, more of that like melon, like honeydew melon and cantaloupe vibe. But again, just like slightly off with that funk. On the peat on the finish right now. Somewhere between like ashy and again, kind of like rubbery sort of peat. Really like. Yeah, actually, you know what? Not even so much rubbery. It was more on the nose. Sooty, a sooty type of peat smoke. Yeah, this is nice and complex. There's a lot going on here. You're not going to mistake it for like a well-aged Campbeltown malt, but it's compelling. It is holding my attention. I could have multiple glasses of this and be fairly satisfied. 46% is helping the body hold up there too. It's not coming off thin, not noticeably thin, not watery, anything like that. And the finish is still going right now. It's been at least 45 seconds since my last sip. Probably closer to a minute. Yeah. All right, let's take another sip. Focus more on the finish this time and see if we can come to a score. Now I'm getting like a saltwater taffy along with those fruits. The peat. It's dirty, funky, fruity, straight up delicious. Yeah, this is a shorter finish than what I'm used to with something like Springbank 10. Or obviously, like, I can't compare it to the Kilkerran heavily peated because that's cask strength. But shorter finish and it is coming off younger. There's a bit more pepper on the finish right now. Right now, a lot more cracked pepper on the outside of my tongue. So a bit harsher in that way. Usually, I don't quite get that on the finish with the Springbank products, the Glen products, and Glen Scotia. Usually, it's a lot more rounded. So that youth is coming across in that way, I think. However, this is a great blended malt. This is phenomenal. And it seems like they're putting this out in large enough numbers in the UK that it's sticking on shelves so that people can get a bottle of it. I saw it in numerous stores on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. I saw it in Campbeltown. It seemed like if you wanted a bottle, you could get this. Not so in Canada, but in the UK, it sounds like you're set and at about £35 a bottle. I think that's great value. I think that's phenomenal value, especially when it's so hard to get your hands on, really, honestly, any of these bottles except for maybe the Glen Scotia 15. I don't think Taters have scooped that up yet. Yeah, I'm really stoked with this. This is awesome. I had some skepticism because I wasn't sure if it could live up because we expect so much of these Campbeltown distilleries, but it's phenomenal. Now, one thing I did do just for a fun experiment is I went ahead and I blended equal portions of these 5 exact bottles together in a glass to see how it would come out to compare to the Campbeltown Loch blended malt. So I made my own blended malt of these 5 bottles, and nose is a lot softer, gentler, not as much peat, not as much funk. Honestly, a little bit of alcohol coming off of it too. This has been sitting here for about 40 minutes, so it hasn't had much time to marry. Yeah, just malt, a bit of peat, not overly present. Some apple, some pear, some honey. Let's take a sip of this. Let's see. Why not? It's fun. A lot more body on that. A lot more oily and viscous, probably because it spent more time in oak. I'm gonna guess that having 15-year-old Glen Scotia and 12-year-old Kilkerran and 10-year-old Hazelburn Springbank is probably bringing the age average up in my home blend here, as opposed to what was in the Campbeltown Loch. Some good amount of peat on the finish here. Not as much funk, that's for sure. But really interesting. I'm gonna play around with blending these 5 a bit more if I get my hands on my own bottle of Campbeltown Loch. I can start kind of trying to dial it in to see what I can make. However, the nose just wasn't compelling to me, and I'm not a professional blender. I honestly, the Campbeltown Loch is better than my little home blend here. This needs some fine tuning, needs to be dialed in to be better than the Campbeltown Loch, but I think you could do it. I think if you use the right proportions, took your time, married it, let it sit for a week or 2 before going ahead and tasting it, you probably could make a better blended malt. That's a lot of work, and they've already done it for us in this glass. So let's get to a score on the Campbeltown Loch blended malt. Again, £35 roughly, give or take, for the price on the bottle. It held my attention the entire time. I'm still wanting to nose it, to smell it, to drink it. And I'm probably going to go ahead and buy my own bottle. I'm going to source it, I think, from the UK and find a way to get it here to the west coast of Canada. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna give this an 86 out of 100. It's probably closer to an 85, 84.5 for performance overall, but the value is just really good. So I think it's worth a bump up by at least a point if it was an 85. So 86 out of 100. If you don't like including value as a consideration for a review, I get it. But it's a really important thing when people are purchasing whiskeys, and it's tough to ignore. So that's what I'm going to do here. But if you don't want to, then just take it at the 85 out of 100 score. Thank you once again, guys, for joining me on Whiskey on the West Coast. If you go ahead and like, subscribe, and comment down below if you've had Campbeltown Loch. Let me know what do you think of it. And with my earlier question about making your own Campbeltown malt blend, let me know what you would swap out as your special ingredient, your special release choice to really kick that up a notch. Until next time, guys, from the West Coast, slàinte.